Thank you very much. Glad to be here once again at Scrum-Day, and we've just finished a Scrum Master course, and one of the things they talked a lot about is what to do with your management, okay? Well, I just happened, in the last week, I got an email from ResearchGate saying, some of your work has been cited by a paper on complexity management theory. And then I got a follow-up email saying there are 211,000 papers on complexity management theory. I didn't even know anything about this. The whole management theory people all over the world are writing about adaptive management, flexible management, changing the way management works. So maybe as a community, we need to start pulling out some of these papers and giving it to the management and start having training for them in the current state of thinking about management. Now, I want to talk, though, mainly today about going back. I was asked to talk about Scrum changing the world and making a difference. And one of the early inspirations for me was a man named Buckminster Fuller. And back in the 1970s, early 80s, he would come into a university, a big conference room like this, and he would talk for 8 hours. He would just talk. And I went through one of those talks, and his message was, the forces of evolution are causing a massive change in humanity. And this is precipitating a crisis. And what's happening is that the people are going to start working together, and they're going to start building together a better world. And instead of being separate, independent, having their own agendas, fighting with one another, they're going to come together as a unified force to transform the environment. And all these problems that we have are just bumps along the road. And when that happens, everybody on the planet will have a higher standard of living than anyone on the planet has ever had. And he said, we're actually all billionaires. Now, why are we actually billionaires? Because today we're using only 1/4,000,000th of 1% of the energy that's available to us. And the reason for that is that people are hoarding information, they're siloing technology, they're suppressing any new technology that's going to compete with the old technologies, and they're keeping people deprived when they should be millionaires. All we have to do is unleash the forces that are there. Well, that's going to require us all waking up, okay? We have to wake up to that fact and start acting in a way that we bring about this change. And one of the people that has also been an inspiration to me taught people how to start this journey. Okay? The Buddha said, the whole of Buddha's teachings is basically the Four Noble Truths. And the first one is, life is full of dukkha. And dukkha is just like it sounds like. It's full of bad stuff, right? Anybody, do you have bumper stickers in Germany that says shit happens? That's the dukkha. And in Scrum, we know there's impediments everywhere, right? That are holding us back. Now, the second noble truth is, the Buddha said, well, why do we have all these impediments? It's because they actually use the term grasping. We're attached to them. We act in a way that we hold on to them. We won't let them go. And the image they use is a monkey's trying to get a cherry out of a bottle, reaches through, grabs the cherry, but the monkey's fist won't fit back through the opening in the bottle. So the only reason we have all these impediments, I mean, I worked on a project where I had a guy from Toyota in charge. I gave him 11 corporate impediments, and it only took him 4 days to eliminate it in a $55 billion company. So he taught me, none of you have to have any of your impediments for more than 4 days. If you have someone in charge that understands how to remove them, right? The only reason you have them is you're stuck. So the third noble truth is there is a way out, okay? That's the good news. And the way out that the Buddha taught is the Eightfold Path. Well, in Scrum, we have something similar we call the 3-5-3. There's actually 11 things. But it's all about, as the Buddha taught, right living, living in the right way, doing the work in the right way, having the right mindset. All of these things can allow you to let go of the impediments and release the abundance that's sitting there. You know, we were talking on the way over, you know, a kid living in a hut in Siberia can pull out his cell phone and become a Bitcoin millionaire today. There's no impediments for anyone. I was in India. My wife and I took a 2-week trip in India along the Ganges River in a riverboat. We stopped in all these little villages, the poorest villages in India. And every place we stopped, the kids are out there with their cell phones taking pictures of us. They took more pictures with their cell phones than I took, okay? So every kid in India has access to a cell phone. And that means they have access to the internet, and that means they have access to all the knowledge that's available on the internet. And the opportunity is unbelievable. So we just need to unleash that opportunity. So here's an example of the dukkha that holds us back. A few years ago, we released in the United States a healthcare.gov site that was supposed to allow 7 million people to sign up for insurance. We had 24 of the biggest contractors in the United States that spent $500 million. It worked for many years with hundreds and hundreds of people, and they turned it on, and not a single person could sign up for insurance. So that's a massive amount of dukkha for the population of the United States. Nobody can sign up for health insurance. But even worse, we had hundreds of people working for years producing nothing, absolutely wasting their time in jobs that it could have been a completely dead end. The good news about this project is that President Obama called the Scrum company that did all this fundraising and voter targeting, and he said to the CTO, you need to help me fix this. And the CTO went to California and pulled 6 Agile guys into Washington. And 6 weeks later, they had 7 million people signing up for insurance. So they were lucky that the Agile fix was so easy on this. But this is going on everywhere, and particularly in big government projects. And there's a simple solution. So a few years ago, I was asked to come down to the Pentagon because the Congress had put in the Defense Appropriations Bill that all IT projects in the Department of Defense must be Agile. So we went through Scrum with the leadership of the Pentagon, and I said, you know, all you have to do is put 1 paragraph in your contracts. Because right now, today, you put out a request for proposal for a new system, and every beltway bandit with the consultants along the Washington beltways, we call them the beltway bandits, okay? They come in, they all want to get the lowest bid, So they get the contract, but they're not going to make any money on the low bid. So they're going to put in the contract time and materials. If you make any changes, it's going to cost you. And then they want to make the maximum number of changes to cause the maximum budget overrun, which will make the project absolutely as late as possible. I said, they are bleeding you dry every day of the week. And some of those Pentagon leaders actually started pounding the table. That's right. We got to do something about this. And I said, well, all you have to do is put one paragraph in the contract. All the changes are free. Then everything would come in on budget, on time, with everything you want. And I explained to them how to do this. You want a new feature. In Scrum, you can put a new feature in at any sprint. All you have to do is throw away one of the useless features, because we know 65% of features are never or rarely used by the end user. So this gives you an opportunity actually to throw away some of the junk and introduce a new feature at any time. I said you could save $100 billion this year, no problem, just by putting that in your contracts. But you could do even better than that. Not only can you get change for free, you can get money for nothing. And the way that works is when you're building something, in the Agile way, you're building the highest value first, and as you're building it out, you don't know where the point is where the value of the next feature is not worth building. But as you're going sprint to sprint, you're getting clearer and clearer. You know, we're getting to the point where we're starting to get into the useless features, because in the sprint review, nobody's getting incited anymore. And so once you hit that point, if the contract says you can stop and deploy, then in some of the vendors I work with, typically the supplier will get 30% of the remaining value of the contract, and the customer saves 70% of the remaining contract, so they both get money for nothing. Now, the value of this is not so much the free money they get, but it actually provides a completely 180-degree different incentives. Both the customer and the vendor are incented to come in early, whereas right now with traditional projects, they're incented to come in late. Okay? And this project management system produces so much waste. It's so unbelievable. It's so depressing to the people that are building inside it. It's so disruptive to the people that want to get some value. It screws the taxpayer every day. They're flushing your money down the toilet with this system. It needs to change, and it should have changed a long time ago. And until we in this room actually get this fixed, the dukkha will not go away, okay? Now, some people can make it go away pretty fast. So, for example, the Saab Gripen, Aviation Week says the best aircraft in the world of its type. Jane's Aviation Weekly says it's the cheapest aircraft of its type. It costs 20% of the competition, both for initial acquisition and life cycle maintenance. And because they're getting twice the work in half the time, the price is 75% less, right? Now, this is what Scrum was designed to do. In fact, this is was one of my ideas. If we could sell everything at significantly less cost, then everybody on the planet could have more stuff that they wanted, right? So the poverty level would be reduced. And if we keep on doing that, we can do even better than that. We just published a case study in Schlumberger, a big oil company, doing $1 billion SAP deployment. Actually, they had spent $1 billion. And they will look at potentially another $2 billion before they ever got it. So we booted up Scrum, and they're immediately delivering 11 times as much stuff, and in less than a year they deployed. For a few $100 million they deployed, and they saved themselves probably at least at $1.5 billion within a few months. So that's making the dukkha go away, right? The CIO called me up and he said, Jeff, we spent $100 million with the big consultancies trying to get Agile. They didn't even move the needle. He said, we think they're just trying to build more hours. Right? So he says, I'm calling you with your little company with a few consultants. Send us 3 or 4 of your people, and we'll deliver a $1 billion project in a few months. And the CIO was a triathlon trainer. And the other key person on the senior management was a 5th-degree karate black belt. So I had a much better opportunity with these guys because they understood how to, whack a project. So the first thing the CIO did, he said, if we're going to do twice the work in half the time, then I'm going to just start by cutting 40% of my people from the staff. They're mostly external vendors. Didn't have to fire anybody. And within a few months, they delivered 20% more stuff with 40% less staff. And I said, well, this is only beginning. You only got 20% more with almost half the staff. The goal is 100%. Are you ready to go the next 20%? And most managers kind of give up then. They get a 20% improvement, and then, Agile must work. They give up. But that's only the beginning. But as a triathlon coach, he knew, okay, the first triathlon is just the beginning. The next one, you need to be faster. So within a few more months, we had data showing 11 times faster. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm talking to the guys at Intel, and they're starting to send me data and saying, hey, at Intel, they have many teams, many groups of teams, but this one group of 500 teams. They have hard data showing 18 times faster. It took them 10 years to get there. Okay, so if you can go 18 times faster, then most of your dukkha has already been removed. Okay, things are getting a lot easier. So what we're training, particularly management on these days, is dukkha removal. And we do it by talking about how not to be a loser, okay? And this book and movie, Moneyball, is about a losing baseball team. And so they hired a statistician to come in and look at what they might do to stop losing. And the statistician said, the data shows that most of the runs, the score in baseball, is achieved by people that can just get to first base. The home run hitters, they score some of the runs, but not most of them, and they're very expensive. So don't hire any of those people. Only hire people that can get to first base. So they started doing that. Within a year, they were number 2 in the league. They were winning almost all the games, and the salary costs were significantly less than average. So we can apply the same principles in Scrum. Everywhere we go, we find if we can get the leadership to prioritize all their projects, all their initiatives, all their releases, the bottom 30% is stuff that shouldn't be done, and it becomes obvious once you prioritize. At GE, we saw a third of the teams did not have good product ownership. They were just making stuff up. Okay, so and as soon as the business found out the features that they were making up, they said, we don't want those. They have no business value. What happens to a company that does that? You wind up laying off a lot of people because you don't have money to pay for them. And they've laid off hundreds of people because of that, simply because they couldn't prioritize. For the stuff that's remaining, we've known for 20 years in software that 2/3 of the features we build are never or rarely used. And we're seeing the same thing in hardware. And the goal on Scrum is for the product owner to stop building that stuff. And then when you get to the remainder, the 25% of the stuff that the customer actually used, then it's all about how well, how fast, and how good can the teams deliver. And when you look at the process efficiency of teams, I asked GE, I said, they're the only company that actually knew the answer. I said, what's the process efficiency of your Scrum teams? They have Six Sigma experts there that measure everything. They said 5%. Well, 5%, lean is 25% or more, okay? So they're a long way from lean. Well, the good news is that I was working with an Indian team who wanted to know what KPI should we use for our Scrum team. And I said, well, process efficiency is the only thing that matters. And process efficiency is the ideal work time totally focused divided by the time to get to done. So figure that out. It's already in your Scrum tooling. How many of you are using Jira in here? It's all sitting there in Jira. So they made the tool present on the front screen. As soon as they opened up the tooling, they'd have the running process efficiency per story. Okay, so if a story took an ideal day of work, but it took 20 days to get it done in Jira, the process efficiency would be 5%. But as soon as they turned this on so they could see it, within 3 days they had it to 80%. And on the 4th day, they were done with everything in a 2-week sprint. And it was funny because they called me up. They said, we don't know what to do. We have no backlog. We're going to have to go talk to our management. I said, well, I told you this was going to happen. Where's the product owner? You know, what's your product owner doing? So if a new Indian team can do this in 3 days, I think right here in Germany, you guys could do it next week. See, that is the paradox. It is so easy to make the dukkha go away. But many of you won't do it. You won't look at the data in Jira. You won't make it transparent to the developers. You won't coach them to drive their process efficiency to 80%. And next month, you'll be complaining bitterly about how hard it is to get anything done. You're the monkey with your hand in the bottle. When are you going to let go? That is the question. Well, within a week, you can eliminate the dark work. We did that. We've done that in every major corporation we've gone into. It just really takes usually a meeting in the morning. One company did it with even without us. They they prioritized everything. It was an IT services company with about 1,000 people, and they looked at the list, and the 30% at the bottom was Windows 7 support, and almost everybody was using Windows 10. They said, that's crazy. We're going to stop that immediately. And the next day, they had 300 free people to work on useful stuff, right? And I hear so many times, oh, we don't have enough people, we've got so much to do. They're sitting there with a third of the people doing totally useless work. And the Japanese would say, you have no respect for people. You're having do stuff that's totally useless. They'll spend their lives as people not adding any value. How can you do that to people? We need to have more respect, more dignity as people. We need to demand that what people are working on is meaningful and has real value. So the first step of the Agile journey is make the dark work go away. How many have done that? Anybody? We've got a few, okay. But it's a small subset. Another interesting thing that's been going on, since the Department of Defense is only supposed to fund Agile IT projects, every vendor submitting a proposal pretends to be Agile. And there is so much nonsense in these proposals that the Defense Innovation Board, which is a group of really senior people out of the commercial sector, people like the former CEO of Google, a guy named Denny Hillis, who I knew because he generated the first massively parallel computer systems and was modeling punctuated equilibrium, which was really important to the thinking about complex systems and how Scrum worked. And they wrote a document called Detecting Agile BS. What is BS in German? Scheiße. And in there they have about 20 questions. Does this contract deliver working product at the end of every sprint, including the first sprint? If yes, we're going to review it. If no, it goes to the Agile BS trash bucket. They have 20 other questions like that, so that the purchasing agents can throw away all this nonsense that all this Agile nonsense that people are proposing, okay? So we need to eliminate the Agile BS, and the data shows clearly that half of the Agile teams out there cannot deliver. They're late, they're over budget, they have unhappy customers. Half of the Agile out there is Agile BS. And so the people in this room need to take responsibility for making that go away. Because if you can make it go away, then the dukkha goes away. And if the dukkha goes away, the world changes, right? So you want to eliminate useless work, and you want to eliminate useless jobs. And I know you can't fire anybody in Germany. They can't fire anybody in Japan either. We just started up a new subsidiary in Japan, and we have some Americans there, the Japanese. We have a Japanese CEO. And all of a sudden, two people show up, and they say, well, who are these people? They said, oh, they're the window people. They're not very effective people. They couldn't do anything useful. So what we do in Japan is we take those people, we give them nothing to do, and they sit in front of a window. But they have to come in early, and they have to stay late. They have to wear a coat and tie. I'm like, what? I have to pay the salaries of the Windows people? I'm like, okay. I'm talking to the coach. Joe Justice is there. He's our American leader there. I said, Joe, we need to scrum these guys. I don't believe they can't do anything. If we scrum the window people, I mean, there's only 6 people in the company. It's just started up. If we can scrum the window people, we're going to immediately get 30% more production, right? We need to give them meaningful work, not useless work. Let me give you an example of this. One of the most interesting things that's happened in the past year is Ricardo's restaurant in London. And he came to a Scrum class. He said, I have a problem. Salaries are going up, but I can't raise prices on food. My margins are getting squeezed. Maybe Scrum would help me. So he took the class, he went back, and he gave the Scrum book to his manager. And then the next morning, the manager came in and said, I read the book, and I don't want to do that because I want to order people around and tell them what to do. So here's my resignation. So he lost his manager on the first day. So now he had a problem how to schedule the shifts. And the manager was spending a full day every week, scheduling the shifts for the restaurant. So he got the whole team together in front of the shift board. And in 1 hour, they scheduled 3 weeks of shifts. And they actually had fun doing it. And they said, this is a lot better because we get the shifts that we want. We can trade off with the other employees. But even more amazing, they found a third of the shifts that the managers were scheduling were not needed. So this happens everywhere. If the managers are scheduling the work, a third of the work is useless jobs. Isn't that astounding? It's everywhere, even in a restaurant. Now, what we taught Ricardo was complex adaptive systems theory, because this is where Scrum comes from, and particularly it comes from modeling the human cell on a supercomputer, where we discovered there are 4 steps, a cell's 4 state changes that a cell goes through to produce a malignant tumor. This is the standard view of cancer today, and this is a recent paper doing the DNA sequencing of the tumors. So today you can actually see it happen. And the interesting thing about that research is that you could make small changes that would prevent that journey to cancer, or if it was a cancer cell, you could make a change that make it reverse. And so what it taught me is in a complex adaptive system, you could move it anywhere in the state space you wanted it to move. And so Scrum is really a scientific research project where every day you make a small change trying to alter the state of the team until you get a really good team. So this is the basics. And even recently, I was asked to work on a complex adaptive system, the architecture for the DAPA trauma pod.
In position. Man down, man down. Medevac, medevac.
So that's a complex adaptive system, a goal-seeking system where all the parts work together and the sum of the parts is greater than, is magnified compared to any piece of the system. That's a complex idea. And one of the important things is that self-organization in a complex system is towards a goal. I've noticed a lot of Agile developers think self-organization means they can do anything they want, right? What would happen if the pieces of the robot did anything they want? The soldier would die, right? And that's what's going to happen to your project if you have Agile developers who think self-organization means they can do whatever they want. So let's go back to Buckminster Fuller. We're a haunted species, haunted by the specter of climate change, economic collapse, automation making our lives redundant. But what if there's other ways to order our priorities? What if we valued human life as an end in itself? Maybe we could move beyond thinking any of these things are a threat. Maybe we could live better lives doing what we really wanted, things we're passionate about. We could stop inventing useless jobs. And because the useless jobs contribute to poverty. They are what makes it impossible for people to have what they need. Because we're just wasting massive amounts. All we would have to do is to increase our energy production from 1/millionth of 1% of what's available, or 1/4 millionth of 1% of what's available, increase it to 1/millionth of 1% of what's available. And we'd all have more than we needed. So let me give you an example of that. I was at Harvard recently. They had a big conference on Africa. And the first speaker was one of the leading person on innovation and disruption. Christensen recently did a book on the prosperity paradox. What keeps people poor, right? And the co-author, Afoso Ojomo, was an American, but he had grown up in Nigeria. He came to the U.S., went to college, was working in industry. And then he was concerned that back in Nigeria, kids had to walk 3 miles before breakfast to get water. So he started up a nonprofit. He collected $300,000, and he built wells in 6 villages. The only problem was, in less than a year, these wells broke down, and the people did not know how to fix them. And they didn't have parts. So he realized that this is a completely useless way of trying to help people. And he gave as an example another African who said he wanted to sell mobile phones in Africa, and everybody told him he was crazy. Nobody can afford a mobile phone in Africa. 4 years later, he has 5 million customers. He sells a company for $3.4 billion. Now, that's an African that made hundreds of thousands of people have a good life because it was an innovation that drove business opportunity and growth. And there's some really interesting things going on. This Kickstarter pump was a better solution than the wells because it was a tool, it was a hand-operated tool that anybody could use, and it was sold by, if you have this, then you can do better growing of crops in the field, you can go into commercial farming, you can build a business, and in a few years, 790,000 people are lifted out of poverty just by a pump. So it's not that hard. And as Buckminster Fuller says, today, if one out of 10,000 of us can come up with an innovation that would feed all of us, so there's no reason that we're not all rich. But you can't change things by fighting the system. You have to create a new model that makes the old one obsolete. So how do we do that? Well, innovation is the key. You know, just like the cell phone guy in Africa, Henry Ford did the same thing in America by creating the Model T Ford. Not only did that create jobs for people in the automobile plant, it created whole industries, steel, glass, and rubber, whole industries around roads, restaurants, all the things that people needed for travel, and created huge amounts of new need for designers, testers, people who could distribute stuff. So one innovator can make millions of people well off with the right innovation. Here's a great innovator that actually was one of the inspirations of Scrum. Professor Yunus won the Nobel Prize for starting up the Green Bank and loaning little bits of money to people in Bangladesh. And I was on the President's Advisory Board of a company called Action, a nonprofit in Cambridge, where my offices are. And based on the Green Bank, we were loaning hundreds of millions of dollars to people, mostly in South America, who were so poor they couldn't feed their children. We get them all together in little groups, and we'd work on a business plan for each one. And what could you do if we loaned you 25 euro? When everybody had a plan, we'd loan them 25 euro. We said, we're going to check in regularly. When you pay the loan back, 99% of them pay the loan back, better than a bank. We're going to loan you more money and scale your business. And many of the people were incredibly successful. Within a couple of weeks, they have enough money to feed the kids. Another week later, they have clothes for the kids so they can go to school. Now they can scale their business. In 6 months, some of them were building a new house for the family. Okay? So I came back to my software team at Easel Corporation, where Jean-Pierre was. And at that time, of course, they weren't doing Scrum. They were late. They had too many bugs. Managers thought they were bad developers. And I said, how long have you been living under pressure, working nights and weekends, being bad developers? And every person said, as long as they've been in the business. And I said, do you want to live the rest of your life like that? It's a miserable life. And they said, no. I said, well, I have an idea that I learned from Professor Yunus. I bet if we implemented it here, we'd have so much software in 6 months. It would be such good software. The customers would love it, but they would say, it's like drinking from a fire hose, slow down. And when they asked us to slow down, we could stop working nights and weekends to spend time with our families. We could take back our dignity as people and regain our power. You want to try it? They thought about it for a while, and they said, they didn't say it will never work here, which is what they say here in Germany, right? They said, we got nothing to lose. We'll try it. Sure enough, 6 months later, they had more software than they needed. So that's just now, if you go to the Green Foundation, which is an umbrella group for green activities all over the world, this is one of their slides. We're delivering working products with Scrum. And I'm still looking the video I saw, a woman with a baby, nursing a baby, standing in a field with her cell phone, and she's doing an interview. She's saying, on my cell phone with my app, I can, if I have a problem with the plants, I can see, okay, this plant's, the leaf is yellow. I can figure out what's wrong with it, and then I know how to fix it. So now I have twice as much production. Also on my cell phone, I can look at the price of my crop in the city, and I realized that the middleman was taking most of the money. So I've negotiated my prices now where I'm making twice as much money for bushel of crop. So now I have 4 times as much revenue. If a poor African woman in a field with a cell phone could do that, you can go back home and do that right here in Germany. Make 4 times as much money. Here's some training that one of our certified Scrum Masters did, Steve Bell, in Kenya, for the green people, teaching them how to scrum better. Also, recently, the World Bank called me up. They said, hey, you know, poverty is going down.
The world has made
and we need a new business model, and we
reducing
think Scrum
extreme
might help.
poverty. But this progress has slowed down and is uneven. If this trend continues, the world will not be able to end extreme poverty by 2030. However, the extreme poverty picture shows an emerging divergence. While extreme poverty is still stubborn in some low-income countries, several others have made rapid strides in moving people out of extreme poverty. But that doesn't mean poverty is completely eradicated in those places. That means to make poverty history, we can't only rely on historical ways of measuring poverty. We are introducing higher standards for a growing world.
So now they're going to build businesses, they're going to build economies.
Outlooks of what constitutes basic needs vary. While in one country you may need just clothing and food to find work, in another you may need a cell phone, a car, and access to internet, in addition to food and clothing. Introducing a societal poverty line that combines extreme poverty, which is fixed, and a relative dimension of well-being that differs from country to country. But poverty isn't all about money. To get a full picture, we need to understand that deprivation comes in many forms, and use a new, multidimensional measure that not only considers income, but also education, electricity, water, and sanitation. Finally, to expand our understanding of poverty, we need to go inside the household to learn how resources are shared. Globally, 104 women live in poor households for every 100 men. However, to know how many women are poor, we need to know how resources are shared within households. This requires more investments in survey research. It is possible to strive for a world in which all regions, countries, households, and people experience the benefits of poverty reduction. But for that, we need to piece together the poverty puzzle to understand its full impacts.
So here's an example of a World Bank investment. One of my recent product owner courses, Edward Mungai came and he brought some photos with him. He said, hey, Jeff, I read your book, and twice the work in half the time. He says, that's too conservative. All my people in Nairobi are getting 3 times the work in 1/3 the time. We're not doing any software stuff. It's all building companies that are clean energy companies. And he showed me some of his data. He says, you need to come and help me train 10,000 African Scrum Masters. It could change the world. And as soon as he was getting 3 times the work at 1/3 the time, the World Bank said, hey, last year we gave you $5 million. How about if we give you $15 million this year? Okay, so if you can really deliver and show really good, valuable results, people shower you with money, right? That's what happens. So a lot of people are trying to do this at scale, and one of the challenges with scaling Scrum teams is for most companies that have more than one Scrum team, the more teams they add, the productivity per team goes lower and lower, because they don't understand how to implement a scale-free architecture for Scrum. And to do that, it requires eliminating bureaucracy. There's a great Harvard Business Review article on a Chinese company that said, in the internet age, what should we do with our managers? We should take every manager, give them 15 people, and they can be an independent startup. We'll take a product owner organization that will own platforms that will facilitate collaboration of the 4,000 startups, but they have no control. They just, because every startup can work with whoever they want. And this organization primarily builds appliances for households, air conditioners, stuff like that. And the CEO, I'll be on the top working with the product owners. So what's he's done? He's taken every manager, deployed them to the front line, give them then a P&L, and if they make money, they grow, they split. If they don't make money, they shut them down and they move them to another place. Okay, isn't that a great management solution? That's what's going on in China, because it gives every manager total responsibility for building value for the company. Here's an example of eliminating dukkha at Toyota. Okay. After we prioritized all their projects and told them the bottom 30% shouldn't be done, we said, let's work on projects at the top of the list. And the first one they said, we need to fix this, was the system that did commissions for dealers selling Toyotas. They had 200 people working 5 years, nothing delivered. We looked at those 200 people, we figured we needed 20 of them plus a really good product owner, and 6 months later we delivered. So it's just not that hard, right? But you have to stop people from doing useless jobs. The driver for all this is reducing the time to make a decision. That's what the most recent research shows us. The reason Scrum is successful is that it shortens the time to make a decision, and that is the primary metric that drives successful projects. There is nothing that creates a bigger difference between success and non-success than time to make a decision. It's bigger than waterfall or agile. If you have a waterfall project with decision time less than an hour, it's going to be way more successful than an agile project with decision time over 5 hours. So you have to set up the Scrum right so the decisions are really fast, okay? So that's what we want to do. And some of you are doing scaling with waterfall management. We talked about that yesterday, and that means your decision latency is going to be such that you're going to have around 60% of your projects failing. Have you noticed that? But if you can actually, in every successful, sustainable implementation, the management has moved into a supporting role. The product owners are driving the backlog. If you can do that, then the decision latency goes down. Instead of 60% failures, you can turn that into 60% success. So in our Scrum at Scale training, we have some German Scrum at Scale trainers doing, when is it? October, you're doing the next course, right? We get everybody in the room, and then we build a heat map of their company. Every column is a company. And then we look at what is in the green, what's in the red, what is blocked. And now we're going to go in there, and we're going to remove the dukkha, one piece at a time. We're going to use Scrum to drive that organizational performance. And so now we have quite a lot of people all over the world. And our person in Africa, I sent him a note yesterday. I said, Uven, he's one of the leading business people in Africa. He's an adjunct professor at Harvard Business School, and he's a head of a VC, venture capital firm in San Francisco. He's a certified Scrum at Scale trainer, and he wants to roll that out across South Africa. So I said, send me some data on what's happening in South Africa. I haven't heard back from him yet, but we need more stuff in South Africa. And we need to deploy that across the continent. So, life is full of dukkha. The reason is you're holding on to the impediment. There is a way out. All you have to do is implement good Scrum. That's my message today.